Hi, this is Hank reporting from Kyiv, and this is my update on Russian-Ukrainian war. Let's see what happened around Ukraine in the last 24 hours. Victory plan revealed. Evacuation in Kharkiv region. Possible encirclement in Donbas. 266 vehicles burned by traitors. North Korea plus Russia. How Putin refused Crimea earlier. Dragon Teeth more effective than FPVs. Drone attack and Russian losses in Ukraine. I have almost finished writing the text for this video and official information has appeared, with which I will now begin. This is of course the victory plan presented by President Zelensky in the Ukrainian parliament today. We have all heard about it for a long time, we've been waiting for the details to be announced and it has happened. 5 main points have been publicly announced and there are 3 more that are kept secret. I bet that all the most interesting things are described in these 3 points, but okay, let me go in order and briefly tell you what we already know. First, an official invitation for Ukraine to NATO before the end of the war. In his opinion, this should be evidence of the partners' determination. I believe the president decided to start with the most painful issue. Ukraine certainly needs NATO as a guarantee of security. NATO needs Ukraine as a shield between them and Putin. But NATO is also afraid to officially get involved in this war, and we see how they avoid it like fire. We were lucky that over the past few years Jens Stoltenberg was NATO Security General who seemed to support and understand us well, and now Mark Rutte has taken his place and he also consistently supports Ukraine. But all the other participants see the situation so differently. I will not even begin to discuss it. My guess is that NATO will not accept Ukraine until the end of the war. I wanted to say, but they might give us some kind of candidate status, and then I double-checked and surprise! Ukraine has already been a NATO candidate since 2018. To hell with it, we have no chance here now, unfortunately. Second, strengthening the defense of Ukraine. This includes such things as continuing operations on Russian territory, as in the Kursk operation, to push the Russians away from our territory. Okay. Strengthening our air defense system with the help of partners, that is, so that NATO countries help us shoot down Russian missiles flying in our direction. We have already shot down thousands, but the 100 that go through our defense cause enormous damage. I doubt this. Lifting restrictions on the use of weapons in Russian territory. Something Putin is so afraid of and something that would give us a real help in the battle. A logical step, a simple step. But for this, the people making decisions need to have balls. Let's wait. Access to intelligence from our partners. Yeah, we already have some data in the shared with us, and we have an ICE satellite which gives us intelligence, but of course CIA, MI6 and other intelligence agencies have their own valuable developments. I believe that no one will ever announce this point publicly, but it looks real. Third, placing a non-nuclear weapons complex in Ukraine to deter Russia. This is rather vague concept. I do not quite understand its essence, but if we take into account that there is a secret addition to it, that our partners received, then it looks like this, in my opinion. Give us a powerful non-nuclear arsenal so that Putin will be scared. To me it looks like just give us more guns, really. Fourth, economic support for Ukraine and strengthening of sanctions. For some reason this point seems to me the easiest and most realistic to achieve. Yeah, of course, for Germany, for example, it's easier to say, here's another billion for salaries for doctors and teachers, just do not ask for those missiles again. An interesting thing is that the Ukrainian economy is generally quite closely connected with the West. We have a huge number of IT companies and employees who create profits for the West. Our country buys a lot of goods in the West for dollars and euros. I swear that every military man I know buys American equipment, at least half of everything from boots to weapons. Ukraine is now your best client and war is a huge business. So this point seems to me the easiest to achieve. By investing in the Ukrainian economy, you guaranteed to receive your cash back. And one more thing. I hope you understand the reference. Joint use of Ukraine's natural resources, which are valued at trillions of dollars, and joint investments in their extraction. Now that's interesting. Earlier, as far as I remember, Zelensky was advised to make an offer to partners to show the literal benefit of supporting Ukraine. Something that can be converted into dollars and euros. And now it seems we have reached that point. I will make a remark on my own. When I studied the country's geography at school, I remember these squares and triangles on the map that showed deposits of valuable national resources in Ukraine, and I can't stand remembering them because there were so many of them. In addition to the favorable geographical location between Europe and Asia, because of which throughout the history we have been fighting wars. We have 2 seas, an excellent climate and super rich soil for agriculture and huge deposits of natural gas, uranium, lithium, titanium, graphite, iron, coal, and somewhere there is oil. This will be your profitable investment. Please help us win the war and you will have cheap gas for Europe and huge deposits of lithium for the production of batteries instead of China, titanium for medicine and aviation, grain for the entire planet. Now that's money talk. Fifth, after the war is over, you'll be able to save hundreds of millions of dollars by unloading the NATO contingent. American soldiers will go home from Europe and Ukrainian soldiers who have gained invaluable combat experience will be the basis of Europe's security. At the moment, we have about 1 million people serving in the army. You will not have to risk the lives of your people for the sake of security in Europe. We have everything you need. You see how effectively we fight international terrorism. Our army is well coordinated and stubbornly follows all international laws, which now limit it so much, by the way. All the dictators of the world see this. After the end of this war, we can guarantee security and order in Europe. This is definitely a win-win situation for everyone. Let me not pretend to be too smart, but just say as I see it, this is a very real plan. Most likely the first point is really what is called shoot at the moon, but all the others are quite real and seem understandable. There is nothing like build us a Death Star or give us the biggest nuclear bomb. Honestly, I want to believe that big politicians will have the courage and that they will see the benefit. Everyone is tired of this war, but it must end fairly and Russia must pay for everything. I will leave for you a link to the official version of this plan on the president's website in English if you want to read the details. Today, the 966th day of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. Our general staff has always described the situation in short. We repelled the attacks, we held the territory and so on without much details. From interesting statistics, we know that the Russians carried out 65 airstrikes and dropped 130 cruise bombs on the territory of Ukraine. This is a lot considering that we still have no defense against such bombs. At the same time, a message appeared that in the Kharkiv region, mandatory evacuation of the population from the several settlements had begun. Here on the map, I marked this area. The head of the region said this: "The military situation is worsening and we cannot ensure the heating season there, the provision of electricity or the provision of humanitarian aid." This is certainly bad and at the same time shows that the war is not static. In autumn 2022, Ukraine carried out a successful counteroffensive in this area and liberated Kupyansk from the occupiers. Now the front in this area is moving in the opposite direction. The same thing is happening in the Kursk region. Somewhere we are recapturing territories, somewhere we are giving it up. What I know is that in the Kursk region we can say that there is a maneuver war going on, while in all other areas the usual tempo of the creeping advance of the Russians is more or less maintained. As you can see, I don't really like to describe maps, firstly because there is no point in making a sensation out of the transition of 1 square mile from one side to the other and back in 24 hours. And I do not want to do harm by publishing information too quickly. It's not that I have such a popular channel, but you know how the internet works. One said it without thinking and millions spread it. While I was finishing writing this blog, a statement appeared that the Russians probably reached the town of Selidovo in the Donetsk region. At the moment, it has not been officially announced, but I see many are already talking about it. So I will leave this news here as a short note and we will follow the development there. Perhaps this is not happening as quickly as they say. I'll not make a sensation, but I want to say that in the news we hear that Ukrainian troops left one settlement and in private conversations, the military says that their friends, our soldiers, are still there 2 weeks later. So I'm inclined to think that they are not showing us everything and this is correct. The Main Intelligence Directorate published this video filmed in Kharkiv region near the northeastern border. It was stated that the Kraken, Artan and international giant units in which foreigners who come to fight for Ukraine serve carried out a major operation and, quote, cleared 400 hectares of forest, seizing battalion area of the enemy, destroying 3 motorized rifle battalions, the Storm Detachment and the Reconnaissance Company of the 7th Separate Motorized Rifle Regiment of the 11th Army Corps of the Russian Armed Forces. During the assault, they also took prisoners. They report that the situation of the occupiers after the operation in this section on the front worsened and was close to hopeless. This sounds quite optimistic in my opinion. Lol-K good news. The hunt for traitors who set fire to military vehicles continues in Ukraine. Of course, this is outrageous because we're collecting this money so hard, literally dollar by dollar for these vehicles, and then we're feeding them so that the military can carry out their missions and save lives. The fact that traitors burn transport in the rear for money and thereby literally harm the country's defense capability during a war is a crime. We often see how the security service and the military themselves catch arsonists. As a rule, these are young people who were promised money by their curators from Russia for setting fire to military equipment with video recording. In this video, you see just a case. In 2024, 266 vehicles have already been burned in this way, and this is very bad. And this week, they were joined by reports on government agencies being mined. This is probably the simplest terrorist trick in the world. You have probably also encountered such fake mining at least once, but there is a big difference in that in Ukraine this is the most real threat today. Therefore, such calls also harm the state. If I had a choice, I would make the punishment for such violators as public and severe as possible, so that others would not even think about doing the same. Okay, I've waited a couple of days to sort out the North Korea issue. We know that Putin and Kim signed the Treaty of Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between the Russian Federation and North Korea, and now Putin has ratified it. I've seen so many speculations about what this means and tried to figure it out. First, for about a year now, North Korea has been supplying shells to the Russian army, and this has an effect on the battlefield. Without the Koreans, the Russians would have lost most of their artillery potential. Who would have thought before the war that things could turn out like this, that a great ruler would humiliate himself and beg from a Rouge dictator? It's clear that this is not because the Russians are doing so well, and from this follows the conclusion that North Korea is unlikely to start a war with South Korea now, because when you go to war you do not give up shells and do not blow up roads, but vice versa. Second, now there is a question about the supply of people. Yeah, you have already heard about this conditional 10,000 Korean soldiers. There are many questions here. Firstly, if they are already somewhere near the front, then it would be impossible not to notice them. This is not a needle in a haystack. Secondly, if they enter the war, then in what form? Will a North Korean general lead them to the offensive, or will Putin's general do it through an interpreter or after Kim's approval? Either option looks complicated. Let me remind you that I'm not a military expert. I only study this data that I received from various sources, and my conclusions may be wrong. What would be logical? For example, so that Korean soldiers with no combat experience would guard some parts of the distant Russian border and thus allow the Russians to move their troops, or so that the Korean military would engage in narrow tasks like shelling Ukraine with ballistic missiles, for example. In any case, the fact that Kim decided to exchange shells for stolen Ukrainian grain is very bad. The fact that dictators even realize that the West is reacting hesitantly is also very, very bad news. Guys like Kim and Putin should be first punched in the face when they attack and not given reasonable arguments not to continue attacking you. In the meantime, we in Ukraine joke about how we have reached a new higher level and now we need to defeat 2 nuclear powers instead of 1. Okay, I always find it hard to imagine how a person perceives such translations if they don't know Russian, but it's critically important to understand this context. Without this piece of the puzzle, the picture will be incomplete. I'm translating verbatim what Putin said on TV in 1991 so that you understand how much the situation now differs from how he behaved at the beginning of his rise to power. In short, he's a completely different person with different rhetoric and values. Let's try to analyze this video. I'll try to make it as clear as possible.
Нам не нравится, что Украина хочет вступить в НАТО, мы хотим забрать Крым, или просто мы не можем договориться по деньгам, газ, сахар. В чем главная проблема наша с Украиной, Владимир?
Host, we don't like that Ukraine wants to join NATO. Do we want to take Crimea, or can we just agree on the gas sugar money? What's the main problem? 25 years ago, the same issues were discussed. Damn it, NATO and Crimea. I was 12 years old. Now I'm 37. Do you think I'll live to see the day when we resolve these two issues, at least for the foreseeable future?
Кем забрать Крым? Это абсолютная глупость. Если мы начнем что-нибудь забирать у кого-нибудь, то обязательно у нас что-нибудь у самих отнимут, или мы что-нибудь потеряем. Во всяком случае, мы начнем такой передел на пространствах бывшего Советского Союза, от которого не сможем оправиться никогда. Поддерживает. Да, я слышу. У нас на территории Российской Федерации только 400 спорных территорий. 400. Я хочу, чтобы все об этом знали.
Putin says, First of all, we don't want to take Crimea. That's absolute stupidity. If we start taking something from someone, then something will be taken from us and we'll be losing something. Jesus, I'm translating Putin, who would have thought? Yeah, that's how he builds sentences. It sounds weird in any language. This is literally said by his mouth. Looking at the way he says it, I can't believe that he really thought so a quarter of a century ago. In any case, we will begin such a redistribution in the former Soviet Union that we will not be able to recover from. Never. We have more than 400 dispute territories in the Russian Federation. 400. I want everyone to know about this. That's the first thing. There is a grain of truth in this. You see, Putin understands perfectly well that his country is woven from once conquered weaker neighbors, Buryats, Dagestans, Chechens, Kalmyks, Chuvashs, and others. As I understand it, the question was to preserve the entire substance so that it would not fall apart. When it didn't fall apart, Putin began to steal new territories, part of Georgia, part of Ukraine, here and there.
Вот это во-первых. Во-вторых, сахар, газ — это все-таки второе. Третье, значит, поле какое-то, на котором можно поспорить. Но поспорить не более того. Главной проблемой, на мой взгляд, является тяжелое имперское наследие России. Все почему-то считают, что Россия осталась империей. А вот сейчас те, кто аплодирует, пусть меня послушают там внимательно. Все считают, что Россия осталась империей и относятся к ней как к империи до сих пор. А это совсем уже давно не так.
Secondly, sugar and gas are still the second. The third field of which one can argue, but argue nothing more. The main problem, in my opinion, is the heavy imperial legacy of Russia. For some reason, everyone thinks that Russia has remained an empire. And then people applaud, and he says, and now those who are applauding should listen to me carefully. Everyone thinks that Russia has remained an empire and treats it as an empire to this day. And this has not been the case for a long time. Let me make an assumption. Before he became president forever, Putin needed to show his country some kind of beneficial change, and he tried with all his might to show what a successful politician he is, how he doesn't hold on to the old, and how everyone will live well with him now. Putin, by the way, kept his promise and lived well, as did those who are close to him, but not all Russians. As they say, the devil is in the details. The man in the video wants to earn sympathy. The man who on February 24 started the most terrible war on the territory of the European continent in the last 80 years deserves a military tribunal. This is also the problem of hypothetical future negotiations with the Russian Federation. They will happen anyway. How can you come to an agreement with a person who changes his entire strategy so radically? Today he says one thing, tomorrow he does something completely different simply because he can. You do not discuss conditions when there is a gun to your head. I once watched a film about Hitler where the phrase, "For the triumph of evil, it's necessary that good people do nothing," was heard, and today I very acutely feel the need to have the support of these good people. This can be related to the news blog on North Koreans' participation in our war, and to permission to use long-range missiles, and to everything else. An interesting message appeared in Russian military publics. I translated verbatim what they wrote. At night in the Kursk region, unknown saboteurs set up dragon's teeth in the rear, without road signs on the highways along which vehicles flee from the FPV drones at speed of over 150 kilometers per hour, or about 100 miles per hour. More than 40 soldiers have already died in a day and more than 40 wounded. This is more losses than from FPVs in a week. This is something new, and I must say it's pretty effective tactic. This is what one of Russian military vehicles looks like, which ran into Dragon's Tooth at night fleeing from our drone. I understand that it's not so easy to set them up. Heavy construction equipment is needed, and this would be noticeable. So the question of how this was organized is still open, but the solution is certainly elegant. The previous night was long. The Russians stockpiled Shaheds and launched 136 drones and several different missiles at us. According to our air defense, they shot down 51 drones and landed another 60 with the help of electronic warfare, and 2 drones flew back towards Russia. I wonder why. The remaining 23 were shot down during the morning. To be honest, I didn't hear anything about damage, so potentially nothing big happened. As for the Russian losses over the past day, we destroyed another 1,450 soldiers, which is slightly above the norm. On average, the Russians lose about 1,200 soldiers every day in the fall. Our losses, as they say, are about 5 times lower, which is in principle corresponds to the military rule of using an advantage of about 5 times in an attack. In any case, these are terrible numbers. Thousands of people die every day because of someone's thirst for power. After a sleepless night, it's quite difficult to analyze such a quantity of information. The text turned out to be the longest ever, more than 20,000 characters, but I'm glad that we saw the victory plan, and if according to it we can end this damn war within the next year, then let it come true and let it be on fair terms. If you want to support this channel, all the links to PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee are under the video. Thank you to everyone who watches these videos and writes to me. Your support is very important. Take care and I hope to see you tomorrow.